What's up, guys? It's Mike and Matt. We're here to talk about mostly just music stuff, but we're just here to talk about because we wanted to start a podcast of our own. It's just mostly what we love about things in life, mostly. So, Mike, tell us about yourself.
I am a lover of metal music, comic books, and overall nice guy.
I'm pretty much the same. Just more. I like metal music. I like studying it because it's something unique. It's something that a lot of people don't understand. Mostly, not like because it's not just screaming or anything. It's like some bands do sing about politics, and they do sing about the world and all the bad things and the good things that are in the world. There are a few bands like The Art Is Murder, Parkway Drive, Architects. They sing about politics. Shit, I dropped my phone. But they do sing about politics, and like one of the main points that they try to bring is that there is darkness in the world, and how can we as people change it, and our future generations down the line are going to be affected by this. That's what they're trying to say. Yeah.
They basically call the world on their bullshit.
Yeah.
And bring to light the ugliness of what humanity sometimes has to offer. And it's interesting in the sense that metal brings a new perspective, in the sense that there's music that always been out there that makes it seem that sometimes life isn't always as happy or glamorous as what it seems, that there is ugliness under the belly of what life is, and metal always seems to be on the forefront of what it is, and sometimes people always don't like seeing or hearing what the ugliness of what the world has to bring. And so sometimes they sing about what everyone feels sometimes on a day-to-day basis, whether they're upset or angry about certain things that are going on in their lives, or maybe they're dealing with a tough problem. And music in general, but metal for us specifically, has that effect where we're able to kind of relate to those songs and those lyrics, and sometimes be able to just kind of let the anger or the aggression that we're feeling and just let it kind of go out by blasting the music and hearing the screaming. And that definitely helps us, or helps me specifically, kind of get rid of all that pent up feelings.
Yeah, and it can also be a bad thing, because you can get too absorbed in this, and that's what really my problem was because I thought that I felt like this type of band. I felt like this all the time, and I didn't like that about myself, and I would just listen to the band's lyrics, and instead of listening to the song as a whole, I took out I was selective on certain lyrics, and that's basically what my downfall at points in my life was. And I wouldn't see the band as a whole and what their message was trying to bring, and that's a bad thing to fall into. And what I want to move on from now is that I've matured a lot since I started listening to it. I have a different outlook on it, and I try to stay. To be honest, I try to stay away from certain bands because it's just stuff that they sing about is just messed up, and I don't agree with them at all on certain topics, and that's why you don't one of the singers, Winston McCall, he talks about how we don't care if nobody likes our music. You don't have to listen to it. You don't have to press play. And he talks a lot about that because it's mostly just because people want certain things coming from his music, and they want that satisfaction, they want that darkness, and a lot of people don't get it, so they don't listen to them anymore.
Well, that's the thing about metal in general. I kind of feel like, especially when people ask me like, "Oh, what type of music do you listen to?" I always kind of feel like a rebel, but I take pride in the sense that musicians in the metal scene, or just music in this general, what's hardcore metal, alternative, they really don't care what their critics or even sometimes what their fans say. They create music for themselves usually, and it's mostly about them. When they create the music, we just happen to really like what they create and when they create it. And so what I've seen a lot of times in the music scene is, yes, sometimes they take in perspective what their fans want, but for the most part, these musicians are creating things off the top of what they like and what they want to hear themselves sometimes. So it's interesting to see that they don't have a status quo to live up to, essentially, what they don't feel like they do. And it's interesting and refreshing to see that artists work for what they want to create and what they want to hear. And sometimes, people and fans alike don't like their message sometimes, and they kind of take a step back. But it's also kind of, you have to kind of know what you're getting yourself into. You have to know what these musicians are here to do. They're here to create what they want to create, and that's with any musical genre, essentially. So it's just interesting to see when people kind of throw a fuss of, well, I didn't like this new CD, or this CD did this, and this. Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously your critique, and you're the fan. You can do that. You're allowed to. But on the second hand, the musician gets to create what he wants to create, and that's exactly what the position of the musician is, essentially.
And I feel like that's what a lot of bands do now, because they mostly appeal to a majority of people that like this music, and it's going to sell and it's going to make money, and that's usually that usually goes well for a lot of bands, and it usually doesn't, because you're trying to make something for your fans, and that's not always the best ticket, because it worked for a lot of bands, because like, for example, it worked for Thy Art Is Murder. It talked about with their new album Holy War, before CJ left, and their previous album was Hate, right? Mm-hmm. And then it talked about, like, I felt like those lyrics were literally almost metalcore, because, and they're a deathcore band, and that's what one of the topics I wanted to go off of was that the difference between metalcore and deathcore, and how deathcore bands take a step back from being deathcore to try to get into that metalcore scene, because it has more fans. It has a bigger majority of people that like it rather than deathcore. And
my perspective, though, would be the opposite. I still think with Holy War, Thy Art Is Murder stayed true who they were. In my sense, at least for the metal scene, the difference between genres, deathcore, metalcore,
like you're saying, it doesn't matter.
No, it does. It does, in the sense that what I envision as deathcore is a lot of blast beats, a lot of screaming, a lot of guitar riffs, and kind of goes off of that.
And it has like a fast breakdown.
Fast breakdown. It depends. I mean, because there are some more grungier bands like Fit for an Autopsy, who I would call deathcore. A little metalcore, but the majority of, I would say, their stuff is deathcore, in the sense that, they have those blast beats and that grungier sound. But the difference between metalcore and deathcore to me is that metalcore, they have roots in hardcore. You can go through a deathcore song and sometimes never hear a breakdown. I mean, though in metalcore, you'll have the beginning of the song, the first 2 minutes, it'll lead up to the breakdown, and then all shit will break loose, and then you'll have that rest of the song. In deathcore, it can maybe from point one to the end of the song, where it's nothing but blast beats, someone screaming at the top of their voice, and just letting all hell rip loose, and that's the difference I see.
Rings of Saturn.
So I really feel like Thy Art Is Murder stayed true to who they were in Hate. I mean, people give them a lot of shit for it, because they really didn't like Holy War, and there's some good songs on there.
Yeah,
I mean, but for the most part, I still think they were deathcore in that one. Hate the Record was definitely deathcore.
Oh yeah.
I just don't think that you can just loop them into metalcore bands are going to evolve their sound, but I still feel like they stayed true to who they were in a couple of songs. Yeah, they had a couple of deathcore or metalcore singers in a couple of songs, but for the most part, I thought they did a good job of just staying to who they were. I mean, that's I don't see them as evolving into metalcore. I mean, you see bands who kind of incorporate both of those, but metalcore to me is like August Burns Red, We Came as Romans, Parkway Drive. They're like the true metalcore bands out there because they incorporate the hardcore breakdowns, they incorporate the metal riffs and the metal screaming, but they also do sing a little bit sometimes. And for the most part, Thy Ars Murder kind of stay away from all of that. I feel like they really didn't do much of any of that. There wasn't really any mellow singing.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, though, their content was different, but I don't feel like it should be justified as metalcore, though.
I feel like that song by Thy Art is Naked and Cold. That was when I feel like CJ really, their former singer, he really sang a lot, or like he sang in his own way, and I feel like that's good on a lot of parts. But speaking of Parkway and We Came as Romans, I saw them at the House of Blues in Chicago last month when they came. It was a really good show. They put on a great show, and what they do and what they try to incorporate, it sounds like the first two albums. I noticed this as I watched the first documentary, Parkway Drive, before I went to the show, and I saw that their first two albums, they had the guitarist from Killswitch Engage help them on those first two albums, and you can see it in Horizons that it's not like this. The riffs are very similar because you have the guitarist from, I don't know his name, but you have the guitarist from EMD?
Adam D.
Oh, okay. You have Adam D as helping Jeff Ling and Luke with those riffs, and Pi as well. You have him helping them, and of course there's gonna be some influence on that, and that's why it's always gonna be very tricky because you're basically, this is like one band that has a mixture of everything, and has hardcore, has metalcore, has deathcore, has everything, and that's what a lot of people love about Parkway, is that it incorporates everything rather than just one type of genre of music. Because there are some bands like Architects that I feel like they hit with their most previous album, I forgot what it was called, but it hit metalcore right to a T because it talked about all the stuff that's wrong with the world, and it talked about all the darkness and everything. So I always thought that was pretty cool, how Parkway was able to incorporate everything.
I think you should look at more though. Well, content and lyrics good, but the actual music itself, I think that's what you need to kind of focus on more though, as far as how you would classify metalcore versus deathcore or hardcore. Mm-hmm. When you listen to a hardcore band, you're going to hear breakdowns, you're going to hear a lot more different grungier types of sounds, less blast beats, more, solid drum beats. When you listen to metalcore, they incorporate that, but they also incorporate the blast beats of the death metal scene. So I feel like Parkway Drive does do metalcore a scene justice, but I also feel like they are evolving in the sense that a lot of their most recent album, Ire, you look at Killing with a Smile and you compare it to Ire or Deep Blue, it's very hard to see the remnants of those two albums, and it's there in a couple of songs, but for the most part it's missing. Ire is definitely a total new sound, and that's what Parkway, Winston starts to sing a little bit more. That's fine. But for the most part, that's not the Parkway I grew up and loved, but which is fine. I'm totally down with the band evolving. Like I said in the beginning, that's bands will evolve as they do, but I do love hearing parts of the band that I grew up listening to from Deep Blue and, you know, Horizons and Killing with a Smile. I mean, Atlas had a couple components of that too, but
I feel like Atlas, they hit their peak and I feel like when bands hit their peak though, I feel like they shouldn't, not necessarily like because this is their life, they dedicate their life to this, but like I feel like when bands hit their peak, they shouldn't wait until downhill where they start sounding bad. They start doing this because partway I said they're gonna put out like a couple more albums, like at least 10 they hope, and they're already on their 5th. But like I feel like bands shouldn't wait to get bad and then where people hate them now, because like bands like AC/DC, they're still fucking playing. Ozzy Osbourne I think he just finished his last couple shows last month.
But I mean, I want a band to keep trying. I mean, I'm okay with, you know, for a band to keep trying to evolve their sound. I mean, I don't want them to give up right away. I see,
but you don't see Winston singing "Romance Is Dead" when he's like 80 fucking years old.
I mean, that'd be awesome. To be honest with you, I mean, I would love to see that. That'd be cool. I mean, but that's the thing though. I hope they never stop playing music. I mean,
yeah, you always hope that, but like,
I mean, if they want to play in their 70s and 80s, doesn't mean I have to go see them.
Yeah,
it's not going to be like when I saw them when I was the first time, you know, a couple years ago. But I mean, it's to be expected with this music. I mean, it's kind of hard to see what the long term goal or the long term idea of these bands are. Is how much are they going to evolve so that they can keep playing their sound. I mean, yeah, they're young and
that's why Parkway tried to change it because they knew they were getting older.
Yeah, but still, I mean, he's in tip-top peak shape.
Oh yeah,
serves himself. So,
I mean, when I went to go see him last month, he was hitting like Mitch Lucker type of sound. He wasn't hitting normal Winston like in the album. It's different from hearing it like, and this is what Mike told me as soon as I got into metal. Like, it's different seeing it live rather than seeing it on a computer, rather than seeing it on a screen.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's because you're gonna get the whole experience when you see it live. You're gonna see the crowd getting into it, the guitarist, the drummer, the singer, getting everyone all riled up, and that's where the addiction comes from. Being able to see this type of music live is you're experiencing it firsthand, what you just listened to maybe 100 times, 200 times in your headphones. You know, driving to work, going to school, running on the bus, riding on the train, and then now you're in front of this artist who you kind of looked up to. You read their lyrics, you read what's on their mind, and you finally kind of see them live, and it's awe-breathing and awe-taking, especially when you get to meet one of them. You know, I got to meet one of my metal idols last year in Eddie Hermida, and it was totally just an awe-inspiring experience because you read what they write and you jam out to it, and it gets you through your day. Sometimes when you're not having a good day or when you're angry, you know, they you put a song on it, it kind of helps you get rid of all that anger, and to be able to meet him and to shake his hand and say thanks for all your music and your freedom of thoughts, and to not be afraid. That's where it's awesome to kind of get that and put it all together. So it's pretty awesome to be able on a show and take it. And I definitely recommend at least once in everyone's lifetime they should go to a metal show, just to feel the energy of everyone just there. And that's the thing, like when you're at a metal show, you're not there to hurt the next person next to you. You're not there to punch the next person up. Because
there are motherfuckers that are on acid and they want to fucking just punch you.
But for the most part, everyone's there just to have a good time. And you usually see it at a show. People, if you fall down, people will pick you up. And that's the thing. I mean, even the singers encourage that you take care of each other at a show. I mean, we are a community in the sense of that we're in a metal community, and that we need to take care of one another in the sense that you have to kind of hold up to a higher standard and prove those stereotypical, stereotypes wrong, and to just enjoy it and have a fucking good time. And that's basically what you're there for, is to have a fucking good time, forget all your problems, and headbang until the sun comes up.
Yeah, and speaking of like Suicide Silence and stuff, like I didn't like their latest album because I felt like it wasn't, even though it was it was a big step from them after Mitch died, but I felt like it was more of a All Shall Perish type of twist to it.
I feel like they stayed true. I mean, obviously Eddie's sound and Eddie's voice is going to be different in the sense that, yeah, it might carry a little bit of All Shall Perish, but for the most part, I feel like they kind of stayed true to Suicide Silence. I feel like but it's all about evolving. I mean, you look at the first album that they came out with, No Time to Bleed, and now you look at the last one. I mean, it's a totally different transformation.
Yeah.
That was totally just the band transforming. So, I mean, it's going to be cleaner. I mean, it's not going to sound as grungy.
I mean, I like when bands stay true to their sound for a good period of time, because it just shows that they really stuck with it. They didn't try to appeal to a majority. But I feel like, I mean, going back to Parkway, I'm sorry about like going through all this stuff, but like they try to. They said it themselves. I've seen interviews where they say, you know, we've written everything that we possibly could out of metalcore, and we just wanted to change our sound. We wanted to change our lyrics. We wanted to do this, but but I feel like you don't need to go to Rage Against the Machine sound, because I mean, you're your own band. You don't need to sound like anybody else except for your own band, and you're grabbing sounds from other bands, and that's what I don't really like.
But you have to realize too, though, for the most part, like, okay, so for example, Amir, the biggest person that inspired Frankie Palmieri was Fred Durst of Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit, and you look at Amir and you see the Fred Durst kind of, you know, comparisons. You see the Limp Bizkit comparisons. They're very similar. Rage Against the Machine inspired Parkway Drive. I'm totally fine with a band incorporating sounds of inspirations that did it for them, because, you know...
But you don't do it on your 5th album, though. That's the thing.
It doesn't matter, though. I feel like you can do it at any time. I mean, you look at, you know, Eddie, and he talks about how Jonathan Davis was a big influence on him from Korn. I mean, and you can sometimes hear, you know, the grungy Korn bass lines in some of All Shall Perish's songs. I mean, but that's the thing. That's what they're there for. That's what, you know, bands are there to inspire each other, to feed off that energy. I mean, you don't want to copycat what the band that just did it did, but it's okay to incorporate some ideas into your sound and evolve it into a new sound. I'm totally fine with bands doing that. I mean, Parkway Drive, I feel like they did 1 or 2 songs like that, but they didn't do the whole album that way. There were still some songs that were straight to their core, but that's totally fine. I'm more worried about them going a little bit mainstream, is my fear of what they kind of I fear like they might be going, you know, not as a little bit too much mainstream, not enough, you know, not under the radar, but true to who they are. But, you know, I mean, bands evolve, like I've been saying, so it is what it is. But, you know, for the most part, I thought, you know, I think they stayed away from Rage Against the Machine sound for the most part. Yeah, just because they play one song at their concert doesn't mean that they are, you know, going towards, you know, every song is gonna be like Rage Against the Machine.
But like, I don't know. I never understood that. Here, Mike will elaborate on this. Is that Rage Against the Machine was something that nobody really liked. No, I didn't mean it like that. In terms of,
be careful, buddy.
in terms of like trying to transition metalcore lovers like Parkway into. That's why it was a big step for a lot of fans. Is that
Rage Against the Machine isn't metalcore.
Yeah,
it's not metalcore at all.
And Parkway tried to mix that in.
But that's fine. That's a band creating. That's the thing people forget. These are artists. They're artists, and that's why they're going to create what they create. And that's the thing, is people forget that these people are artists, that they do what they do, and they create how they want to create, because that's who they are. I mean, you look at anything that an artist creates, they're going to have critics, they're going to have people that don't like their work, but it's key for them just to stay who truth they are and to keep creating what they want to create, what goes off the top of their head, to let it flow. They have to have creative flow, and if sometimes you want to incorporate what inspired you into what made you, that's what you want to do. I mean, I'm totally fine with the band going back to their roots and proving like, hey, I really grew up listening to this band. Everyone has that. Everyone has that band that they grew up listening to. For me, originally it was like System of a Down, Korn, Deftones. I mean, you want bands to draw upon that if that inspired them. So I mean, Rage Against the Machine, they have their own total genre. I feel like, I don't know if I would call them rebel music, but that's what they kind of are. They are against the system, just like System of a Down was. In the early 2000s was fight the system. They're basically doing wrong, and we need to call out their bullshit.
Yeah, and like I don't know. I just don't understand because because bands like that. That's like the band that like politics hate and.
Because they point out what is wrong with the world. That was like those bands like System, Rage, those first two bands they actually had a message behind their content. Mm-hmm. And it was a political message, yes, and that's maybe why those politicians kind of draw against them. But that's the thing, like, you have to realize I guess it's like one of those things that you don't know. You had to kind of grow up through it and listen to it for the first time and understand, like, okay, what are these guys really saying? Why are they saying this? What is their message behind their words? And that's the thing. You have to sometimes delve deeper into what it means. Yeah, you're going to create your own thoughts of what someone else's interpretation of that is. But you want to be able to see this and be like, he's opening my mind. I never thought of it that way. Maybe our system is corrupt. Maybe we're looking at this differently. Maybe they're using us for different purposes than what we really wanted to truly believe. And that's what those bands were back in the day was, wow, okay, I never thought of this way. And that's what music is there for, is to make you think. And it's like art, make you think of things differently than what you normally would.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, like bands like, would you say, like, bands like Led Zeppelin and Metallica had a political message in terms of, like,
yeah, I mean, because, like, you look at it, though, I mean, people, you have the fans now who are into Metallica and Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and AC/DC.
Like, I can be into those bands, but, like, I just don't get it because it's my generation was more modern metal rather than because my cousins grew up and people that I know, they grew up with System of a Down, they grew up with Korn, Slipknot. I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with more, because I literally started with Blink-182, Sum 41, and then I went straight in the Parkway. Like, there was no in between with bands like fucking pussy bands at Warped Tour, like I don't know, like Yellow Card, bands like that. I don't know.
See, that's the thing. Those aren't pussy bands. Those were the bands that I grew up listening to.
Yeah.
It wasn't called metal at the time. It was called, I mean, Slipknot might have been, Korn might have been metal, but most of it, like Yellow Card, Green Day, Blink-182, those guys were called alternative. That was all alternative music.
It's just like,
because it's what it is. It's mm-hmm. alternative than the norm. It wasn't pop. It wasn't old rock and roll. It wasn't, screamo, death metal at the time. It was alternative. It was, I mean, they had some breakdowns. You had Weezer, you had things like that, where it was just chill music that you can listen to. You can turn up the speakers to. You could just kind of drive down the street to. But if you wanted to headbang or something like that, you could. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, oh, this is metal and this is what it is. No, it's alternative. Like, Yellow Card has some really good songs, mm-hmm. and I mean, they have a huge following, like a huge following.
That's why people were upset, because they ended the band, but I feel like all for themselves, they ended it on a good note. And that's what their last album tried to entail.
Yeah, I mean, bands will, and sometimes bands don't end in the best way. I mean, but sometimes bands want to end it on their way too as well.
Fucking Amir.
I mean, yeah, perfect example. Amir, like Frankie was. Whether I don't know what happened with that situation, I wasn't there, but apparently it didn't end very well with the other 4 or 5 bandmates. And those weren't the first people to leave the band; those are like the second or third ones. But I mean, you make it what it is, and sometimes people forget that this is not every band gets a fancy bus when they pull into a city. Not every band has a hotel to go to. Most bands, for the most part, have a simple bus, have a simple trailer, and travel from 3 months out of for the first half of the year, maybe go to a different country for the next half, and the last half they travel again. The way they make money is by traveling, and sometimes it's not always merch. It's not always the most convenient. It's not always the most pleasant, but that's the plight of being an artist in the music industry nowadays with metal and the scene. It's being willing to travel, put in your time, put in the grind, and that's what people don't get sometimes, and why people are like, oh, why did that band quit? Why did that band break up? Well, because sometimes the financial isn't there, and it's weighs on you. I mean, yeah, you can let it all out at the show, but sometimes just getting to the show is tough enough.
And it's like, that's what people don't understand. Like, you can't, as a band, you can't stop touring because there is so, like, you have to get your name out there somehow, and a lot of people don't have time to watch YouTube and like come across your band, but you have to find that you have to grind and dig deep and try to keep touring and try to keep doing what you're doing, because you're not gonna have another chance to come this way again, and that's what the hard thing about a lot of bands, they just end up quitting because they don't have that endurance to keep going, and they get tired. But I mean, anyways, like, music's music, man, and whatever you want to do with it, that's up to you.
You're an artist and that's the thing. People forget the musicians are artists, and they create while they want to create.
But that's all the time we have today. We gotta go. This is Thanksgiving. We decided to record on today because this is like the one time I'd see Mike, but we're cousins, by the way, and if you want to hear more from us, just let us know. I'll be uploading this to Facebook. I'll be uploading this to YouTube. So just let us know if you want us to talk about more. We have good insight, and of course we catch each other on our mistakes and stuff. So obviously we don't know everything. We're human. So, but we do know something about the metal scene. If you would like to hear us more, just let us know. We're gonna keep doing what we're doing and just keep rocking on.
See you.